Little House on the Prairie is remembered for warm cabins, dusty roads, Sunday lessons, and a family that made millions feel at home. But the deeper ache comes later, when you realize how many familiar faces grew up, disappeared, fought private battles, or left us. Pa carried the family with quiet strength. Ma held the house together when everything around her broke. Laura became the voice of childhood, loss, and hope. And in Walnut Grove, even the smallest smile could hide a life that changed far beyond the prairie. Today, we return to Little House on the Prairie, where the stories felt simple, but the years behind the cast became anything but simple. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from, and what was your favorite memory from the show? If you love classic television, forgotten Hollywood stories, and emotional journeys like this, subscribe now. Number 1. Michael Landon as Charles Pa Ingalls. Michael Landon as Charles Pa Ingalls is the face most people see first when they remember Little House on the Prairie. The cabin, the fiddle, the wagon, the hard winters, the Sunday words that somehow felt stronger than any sermon. Charles was not perfect, and that is why he worked. He could be gentle, stubborn, tired, angry, frightened, proud, and still return to the one thing that held the show together: family. Michael Landon, born Eugene Maurice Horowitz on October 31st, 1936, was 37 when Little House on the Prairie began on television in 1974. By then, he was already famous from Bonanza, where America knew him as Little Joe Cartwright. But Charles Pa Ingalls gave him something deeper. It allowed him to stop being only the young, handsome cowboy and become the father viewers trusted in their living rooms. His Charles was quiet until silence was not enough. He could stand in a field with nothing but debt, weather, and bad luck pressing against him, and still make you believe tomorrow could be survived. That was Landon's power. He did not play Pa like a saint floating above hardship. He played him like a man carrying weight in his shoulders, trying to keep his children from seeing how heavy life had become. The miracle was how simple it looked. A hand on Laura's shoulder, a tired smile at supper, a hard stare across the mill, and suddenly the whole prairie seemed to listen. That still mattered. Behind the camera, Landon was more than the star. He became one of the strongest creative forces of the series, working as actor, writer, director, and producer, shaping the tone that made Walnut Grove feel like a place viewers could visit again and again. The show was built on faith, family, work, forgiveness, and loss, but it rarely felt small because Landon understood emotion. He knew when to let a scene breathe, when to let a child cry, and when to make the prairie feel beautiful enough to hurt. Yet the man behind Pa had his own complicated life. Landon was admired, intense, charming, demanding, and deeply driven. Cast members have remembered both his warmth and his force. That combination helped create television that lasted, but it also made him one of those figures who could be loved, questioned, and still never forgotten. After Little House, Landon carried that same emotional signature into Highway to Heaven, playing Jonathan Smith, an angel sent to help people in need. Once again, he gave audiences stories about broken lives, second chances, and ordinary people searching for grace. It was not an accident. Landon understood that television could comfort people without pretending pain did not exist. Then came the ending no fan wanted. In 1991, Michael Landon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and the news stunned viewers who had grown up believing Pa could survive anything. He died on July 1st, 1991, in Malibu, California, at only 54 years old. The loss felt personal because Charles Ingalls had never belonged only to the screen. For many viewers, he had become a memory of childhood, a voice of discipline, a symbol of protection, and a reminder of the kind of father television made people wish they had known. Charles Pa Ingalls endures because Michael Landon made goodness feel human. Not easy, not flawless, human. He made a poor farmer in Walnut Grove feel like the emotional center of an entire generation, and every time that cabin door opens again, it still feels like Pa's coming home. Number 2, Karen Grassle as Caroline Ma Ingalls. Karen Grassle as Caroline Ma Ingalls is the calm after Charles Pa Ingalls walks through the door. The woman who makes the little cabin feel less like shelter and more like home. If Pa carried the dream of the family, Ma carried the cost of keeping that dream alive. She cooked, taught, prayed, corrected, comforted, and stood quietly in the background of a world that often noticed the man first. But Little House on the Prairie would never have had its heart without her. Karen Grassle, pronounced Karen Grassle, was born on February 25, 1942, in Berkeley, California. She was 32 when Little House on the Prairie began its regular television run in 1974, and she came into the role with serious stage training rather than the usual television mother image. That mattered. Caroline Ma Ingalls did not feel like a decoration placed beside Charles. She felt educated, watchful, practical, and emotionally alert. The kind of woman who could look at hunger, sickness, money trouble, and disappointment without falling apart in front of her children. Grassle played Ma with restraint. She did not need to raise her voice often, because her silence already carried authority. When Laura pushed too hard, when Mary needed tenderness, when Carrie was small and frightened, Caroline's face told the story before the words came. She was soft, but never weak, gentle, but not helpless. And when the family was tested, she made survival feel domestic, not dramatic. A meal, a clean dress, a Bible reading, a hand held at the right moment. Those were her weapons against a hard life. That is why her performance still feels powerful. Little House often gave Charles the speeches, the moral thunder, and the final walk into the sunset. But Caroline gave the show its emotional temperature. She made grief feel private. She made sacrifice feel ordinary. She made motherhood look less like perfection and more like constant courage. Behind the scenes, Grassle's experience was not always as peaceful as Walnut Grove looked. In later interviews and in her memoir, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, she spoke openly about alcoholism, recovery, salary struggles, and tension with Michael Landon, especially after she asked for fairer pay as the show became successful. Those memories added complexity to the image fans had carried for years. The woman who played Ma had also been fighting to be heard, and yet time softened parts of the story. Grassle later described a more complicated understanding of Landon, including affection, pain, anger, and forgiveness sitting close together. That honesty made her connection to the series feel more human, not less. Fans did not love Caroline because life behind the camera was perfect. They loved her because the performance survived all of it. After Little House, Grassle returned often to theater and continued acting in film and television. But she never fully escaped the shadow or blessing of Caroline Ingalls. For many viewers, that role became bigger than a credit. It became a memory of mothers, grandmothers, kitchens, prayers, discipline, and comfort when life felt uncertain. In recent years, her public appearances and reflections have helped fans see her not only as Ma, but as a woman who lived through fame, hurt, recovery, and age with unusual honesty. Caroline Ma Ingalls endures because Karen Grassle made quiet strength unforgettable. She made the woman beside the famous father feel like the real wall holding the house upright. And every time Walnut Grove comes back to life, Ma is still there, steady enough to make us believe the family can survive together. Number 3. Melissa Gilbert as Laura Ingalls. Melissa Gilbert as Laura Ingalls is the child who pulls us back through the door of Walnut Grove. After Pa gave the family its strength, and Ma gave it its steadiness, Laura gave Little House on the Prairie its heartbeat. She was the girl running through the grass, asking too many questions, feeling everything too loudly, and learning, sometimes painfully, that growing up on the prairie meant joy and heartbreak could arrive on the same road. Melissa Gilbert, pronounced Gilbert, was born on May 8, 1964, in Los Angeles, California. She was 10 when the regular series began in 1974, though the pilot had been filmed before that. That age matters because viewers did not just watch her act like a child, they watched her grow. Her face changed, her voice changed, her understanding changed. And somehow the show allowed millions of people to feel as if Laura was growing inside their own homes. Laura Ingalls could be stubborn, jealous, brave, funny, selfish, generous, and painfully honest. That was the gift of the role. She was not written as a perfect pioneer girl who always learned the lesson before supper. She made mistakes. She pushed against rules. She wanted attention. She wanted justice. She wanted to be loved in a world that kept testing her. Gilbert made all of that feel alive because she never played Laura as cute for the sake of being cute. She played her as alert, emotional, restless, and real. Her bond with Michael Landon also shaped the performance. On screen, Charles and Laura had one of the most beloved father-daughter relationships in classic television. Off-screen, Gilbert has often spoken about how important Landon became in her life, especially after personal loss in her own childhood. That connection gave their scenes a special charge. When Laura looked at Pa, it did not feel rehearsed. It felt like trust. As the seasons moved forward, Gilbert carried Laura from childhood into womanhood. She survived grief, jealousy, danger, schoolroom humiliation, first love, marriage, and motherhood. The transition could have weakened the show, but it gave Little House a second life. Laura was no longer only the girl with braids. She became the bridge between the innocence of the early years and the harder emotional weight of the later seasons. After Little House, Gilbert kept working in television, appeared in many TV movies, wrote books, and later became president of the Screen Actors Guild, from 2001 to 2005. That chapter showed another side of her, not just the former child star, but a woman standing inside the business that had raised her and arguing for performers who needed a voice. Her life after fame has also been public, complicated, and honest. She has written about childhood stardom, family, love, health, aging, and finding a quieter life beyond Hollywood. In recent years, she has leaned into that softer chapter through Modern Prairie, a lifestyle community and brand aimed especially at women, navigating age, home, creativity, and change. Laura Ingalls endures because Melissa Gilbert made childhood feel remembered, not performed. She gave viewers scraped knees, hot tears, stubborn pride, and a heart always reaching for home. Every time she runs down that hill again, it feels like television is opening an old family album. And for a moment, the little girl from Walnut Grove is still carrying us with her. That is why her story still feels close, even decades later, because Laura was never just a character. She was the viewer growing up to, beside her always. Number 4. Melissa Sue Anderson as Mary Ingalls. Melissa Sue Anderson as Mary Ingalls is the sister who made Little House on the Prairie grow heavier. If Laura carried the restless heart of childhood, Mary carried the burden of being good too early. She was the careful one, the serious one, the daughter who tried to please, study, help, and stay strong while life kept asking more from her than any child should have to give. Melissa Sue Anderson, pronounced So Anderson, was born on September 26, 1962, in Berkeley, California. She was 11 when the regular series began in 1974, and that young age makes her performance even more striking. Mary was not written as loud. She did not chase attention the way Laura often did. Her power came from stillness, from the quiet pressure of a girl trying to be mature before she understood the price of it. In the early seasons, Mary was the responsible daughter, polished, intelligent, and sometimes painful in her pride. She could feel distant beside Laura's fire, but Anderson gave that distance a reason. Mary wanted order because the Prairie gave children so little control. She wanted to do well because failure seemed frightening. She wanted to be useful because usefulness was one way to feel safe in a hard world. Then the show changed her forever. Mary's blindness storyline became one of the most emotional turns in the entire series. The real Mary Ingalls did lose her sight, although later medical discussion has questioned the old scarlet fever explanation, and the television version turned that loss into drama that many viewers never forgot. Anderson had to show a young woman losing not only sight, but certainty, independence, and the future she thought she understood. She did not make Mary's grief theatrical. She made it frighteningly inward. The trembling voice, the anger, the confusion, the small attempts to stand straight again, all of it made the story hurt. That work was recognized. Anderson received a Primetime Emmy nomination for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series for playing Mary Ingalls, an unusual honor for a young performer on a family western drama. It proved what many fans already knew. Mary was not just the older sister. She was one of the emotional anchors of Walnut Grove. Her later storylines were sometimes painful, including her work at the blind school, her marriage to Adam Kendall, and devastating losses that pushed the character through grief after grief. At times, the show seemed to test Mary almost too much, but Anderson kept her dignity. She gave Mary a kind of controlled sorrow that made viewers lean in instead of turning away. After Little House, Anderson continued acting in television movies and films, including Midnight Offerings and Happy Birthday to Me. She later became more private, moved with her family to Montreal, became a naturalized Canadian citizen, and published her memoir, The Way I See It, a look back at my life on Little House, reflecting on her years inside the show that made her famous. Mary Ingalls endures because Melissa Sue Anderson made restraint feel emotional. She showed that the quiet child in the family can carry the deepest wounds, and that courage is not always a speech, a rescue, or a victory. Sometimes courage is a blind young woman standing in darkness, trying to believe life still has a shape she can follow. Every return to Walnut Grove feels deeper, because Mary reminds us that even gentle stories can leave permanent marks on the people who lived them and those who watched closely. Number 5. Lindsay Greenbush as Carrie Ingalls. Lindsay Greenbush as Carrie Ingalls is the little face at the edge of the Ingalls family, the youngest child viewers first remembered running through the grass, tumbling, recovering, and somehow turning a small fall into one of television's most familiar images. After Mary showed how heavy childhood could become, Carrie reminded audiences of something softer. Before the Prairie lessons became painful, before age changed the children, there was still a baby sister watching everything with wide eyes. Rachel Lindsay Renee Bush, known professionally as Lindsay Greenbush, was born on May 25, 1970, in Hollywood, California. She was 4 when the regular Little House on the Prairie series began in 1974, and she shared the role of Carrie Ingalls with her identical twin sister, Sydney Greenbush. That was common in child acting, especially with very young children, because production schedules were long and strict rules limited how much time one child could work. Together, the twins made Carrie feel like part of the family before the character was old enough to carry major storylines. Lindsay's Carrie did not need speeches. She had presence in the corners of scenes, sitting near Ma, standing close to Laura watching Pa, or moving through the cabin as proof that the Ingalls home still had innocence inside it. In a show full of hardship, that mattered. Carrie was the child least prepared for the world outside the door, and that made every storm, illness, fire, and family loss feel more dangerous. The famous opening image of Carrie running down the hill and falling became unforgettable because it felt completely human. It was not polished in the way modern television often tries to polish childhood. It looked accidental, sweet, and real. Exactly the kind of moment families remember years later because no one planned it to be perfect. That small fall helped make Carrie part of the show's emotional memory. She became the youngest Ingalls daughter who made the Prairie feel lived in, not arranged. Before Little House, Lindsay and Sydney had already appeared as young children in the television film Sunshine in 1973. That early work helped lead them toward the role that would define their childhood. But fame came before they were old enough to understand the size of it. While adult actors could build careers around choices, the Greenbush twins grew up inside a show millions of families treated almost like a weekly visit. After leaving Little House, Lindsay did not chase a long Hollywood career. Like her sister, she moved away from full-time acting and lived a more private life. That choice gives her story a different kind of weight. Some child stars spend their lives trying to outrun the role that made them famous. Lindsay seemed to step away from the noise and let Carrie belong to the audience. In later years, she has remained connected to the Little House legacy through reunions and fan events, where the affection for Carrie still feels surprisingly strong. People remember the smallest Ingalls child not because she had the biggest scenes, but because she was part of the family picture. She was the one who made the cabin feel crowded with life, the one who reminded viewers that children were always watching while adults tried to survive. Carrie Ingalls endures because Lindsay Greenbush helped make innocence visible. She gave Walnut Grove its youngest heartbeat, and every time that opening hill appears again, the fall does not feel like a mistake. It feels like childhood preserved, fragile, funny, and still running toward home, inside every remembered Prairie morning again. Number 6. Sydney Greenbush as Carrie Ingalls? Sydney Greenbush as Carrie Ingalls is the other half of a childhood memory most viewers never separated. After Lindsay helped make Carrie feel like innocence running through Walnut Grove, Sydney gave that same small role its second heartbeat. Together, the twins made one little girl possible, but Sydney's story deserves its own space, because behind the shared credit was a real child growing up under bright lights before she could fully understand fame. Sydney Robin Danae Bush, known professionally as Sydney Greenbush, was born on May 25, 1970, in Hollywood, California. She and her identical twin sister, Rachel Lindsay Renee Bush, were the daughters of actor Billy Greenbush and Carol K. Greenbush. Sydney was 4 when Little House on the Prairie became a weekly series in 1974. Though the twins had worked on the pilot when they were even younger, they were credited together as Lindsay Sydney Greenbush, which made many fans believe Carrie was played by one child. That illusion is part of why Carrie feels so mysterious in memory. Viewers saw one little sister, but production depended on 2 little girls taking turns in the same dresses, the same braids, the same family scenes, and the same demanding schedule. Sydney helped carry a role built less on dialogue than atmosphere. Carrie was not asked to explain the Prairie. She was there to show what the adults were protecting. Her most distinct moment came in The God Sister, the Season 5 episode first broadcast in December 1978, where Carrie creates an imaginary friend named Alyssa because her family seems too busy for her. For once, the youngest Ingalls child stepped closer to the center of the story, and the twins' shared presence became part of the drama itself. It was a strange, tender episode, sometimes remembered for its dreamlike quality, but it gave Carrie a feeling that many children understand. Being loved does not always stop loneliness. Sydney's work on Little House was child acting in its purest and hardest form. She was part of a hit show before kindergarten was ordinary, Surrounded by adults who understood ratings, scripts, lighting, and renewal decisions, fans saw sweetness. The children lived repetition, pressure, waiting, and the sudden pain of endings. When the Greenbush twins left after season 8, the show continued, but the world they had known since toddlerhood had already shifted. After Little House, Sydney appeared in the 1983 family film Hambone and Hilly, while the twins also worked in commercials before leaving acting behind to focus on school. That decision made sense. Hollywood had already taken a large piece of their childhood. Stepping away allowed Sydney to grow without being frozen forever as Carrie Ingalls. In recent interviews connected to the show's 50th anniversary, Sydney has reflected on how her mother helped protect the twins during early fame and how young they were when the Little House journey began. That detail changes the way fans look back. Carrie was not just a character on a beloved family show. Carrie was two very small girls, learning what work, attention, and goodbye meant before most children learn their own handwriting. Carrie Ingalls endures because Sydney Greenbush helped make the youngest child feel real without needing many words. She gave the Ingalls home another layer of life, softness, and vulnerability. And when viewers return to Walnut Grove now, they are not only seeing Carrie, they are seeing the fragile cost of childhood preserved forever on screen for millions who remember the little girl running toward home before the world changed, forever, in our hearts. Number 7. Catherine McGregor as Harriet Oleson. Catherine McGregor as Harriet Oleson is the storm cloud that made Walnut Grove less perfect, and that is exactly why the show needed her. After Carrie gave the Ingalls home innocence, Harriet brought friction into the street, the church, the mercantile, the schoolroom, and almost every quiet corner where peace was trying to survive. She was proud, loud, nosy, jealous, theatrical, and impossible to ignore. Catherine McGregor, pronounced Catherine McGreg, was born Dorley Dean McGregor on January 12, 1925, in Glendale, California. She was 49 when Little House on the Prairie began its regular run in 1974, and she arrived with years of stage experience behind her. Before Walnut Grove, she had worked in New York theater and appeared on screen under the name Scotty McGregor, building the kind of comic timing that later made Harriet Oleson feel bigger than the page. Harriet could have been a simple villain, the rich shopkeeper's wife, the gossip, the mother who spoiled Nellie and scolded Willie. But McGregor made her more dangerous and more entertaining than that. She understood that Harriet believed every word she said. Harriet did not think of herself as cruel. She thought she was refined, respectable, and morally correct, which made her even funnier. Every raised eyebrow, every sharp turn of the head, every offended breath made the character feel like a woman constantly performing for an audience only she could see. That performance gave Little House something it badly needed. Without Harriet, Walnut Grove could have become too sweet. Her pride pushed against Caroline's calm. Her gossip tested Reverend Alden's patience. Her marriage to Nels created one of the show's most reliable comic balances, because Richard Bohl played Nels with such weary gentleness that Harriet's storms had somewhere to land. And with Nellie, Harriet became the root of a second generation of trouble, feeding a spoiled child with the same social hunger she carried herself. What made McGregor special was control. She could make Harriet ridiculous without making her useless. Fans laughed at her, rolled their eyes at her, and sometimes wanted someone to finally silence her. But they kept watching because she brought energy into every scene. Even her cruelty had rhythm. She turned complaint into music, status into comedy, and arrogance into one of the most memorable performances in classic family television. Behind the scenes, McGregor's life moved in a different direction. After Little House, she largely stepped away from acting. She became involved in spiritual practice, including Hinduism, and was reportedly away on a pilgrimage to India when the series finale was filmed, which is why Harriet was absent from that final farewell. That absence still feels strange, because Mrs. Oleson had become so tightly woven into the town. For longtime viewers, Walnut Grove without Harriet felt almost too quiet, almost unfinished, like the bell had rung and nobody complained. Catherine McGregor died on November 13, 2018, at the Motion Picture and Television Country House and Hospital in Woodland Hills, Los Angeles. She was 93. Her death reminded fans that the woman who gave them so much comic irritation had also given the show one of its strongest engines. Harriet Oleson endures because Catherine McGregor made trouble unforgettable. She proved that a family drama needs more than goodness to stay alive. It needs pride, gossip, vanity, weakness, and laughter too. Every time Harriet sweeps into the mercantile, Walnut Grove stops being a painting and becomes a real town, full of people who test each other, expose each other, and somehow keep coming back together again. Number 8. Richard Bull as Nels Oleson. Nels Oleson is Patience wearing an apron, the soft center inside the loudest family in Walnut Grove. After Harriet swept through the mercantile like a storm, Nels became the quiet counterweight, the man behind the counter who heard everything, endured almost everything, and somehow kept his dignity, while the woman he loved turned every small complaint into public theater. Richard Bull, pronounced Rich-ard Bull, was born on June 26, 1924, in Zion, Illinois. He was 50 when Little House on the Prairie began its regular run in 1974, and by then he was already a seasoned film, stage, and television actor. He had appeared in many productions before Walnut Grove, including his well-known role as Doc on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea from 1964 to 1968. That experience mattered, because Nels needed an actor who could do less and still say everything. Nels was the husband of Harriet Oleson, the father of Nellie and Willie, and co-owner of Oleson's Mercantile, the store where Walnut Grove came to buy, argue, gossip, bargain, and sometimes expose who they really were. Richard Bull made Nels more than the tired man standing beside a difficult wife. He made him decent without making him weak. His face often said what the script did not have to explain. One glance at Harriet, one slow reaction to Nellie, one gentle word to a customer, and viewers understood that Nels had been surviving domestic drama for years. The beauty of the performance was its restraint. Harriet was fireworks. Nels was the lamp left burning after everyone else had gone. He could be funny because he refused to compete with his wife's volume. He could be touching because he often looked trapped, yet never completely defeated. And he could be moral because, when it mattered, Nels usually knew the difference between pride and kindness. That balance gave the Oleson family depth. Without Nels, Harriet might have become only noise, Nellie only cruelty, and Willie only mischief. With him, the family had humanity. He loved them even when they embarrassed him. He corrected them when he could. He surrendered when he had to. And sometimes, in the middle of all that comedy, Bull let viewers see the ache of a good man who wanted peace in a house built on argument. After Little House, Richard Bull kept working, adding more television credits to a career that stretched across more than half a century. He appeared in shows such as Highway to Heaven, which reunited him with Michael Landon, and later had credits including ER, Hill Street Blues, and Boss. He was never the flashiest star in the room, but that was part of his strength. Character actors like Bull give television its texture. They make the world feel populated, believable, and lived in. Richard Bull died on February 3, 2014, at the Motion Picture and Television Fund Hospital in California. He was 89. Reports said he died of natural causes after being hospitalized with pneumonia. For Little House fans, his passing felt like losing the gentle shopkeeper who had quietly held the mercantile together while chaos rang the bell at the door. Nels Oleson endures because Richard Bull made goodness patient. He showed that kindness can survive embarrassment, that quiet men can still be strong, and that in a town full of big lessons, sometimes the most decent soul was simply the man behind the counter, listening, forgiving, and staying long after the prairie dust settles and the shop window darkens for night again. Number 9. Alison Arngrim as Nellie Oleson. Alison Arngrim as Nellie Oleson is the girl who made Walnut Grove feel dangerous in broad daylight. After Nels gave the Oleson family its patience, Nellie gave it its bite. She was ribbons, curls, money, insults, spoiled pride, and that sharp little smile that told Laura Ingalls trouble had already entered the room. Alison Arngrim, pronounced Alison Arngrim, was born on January 18, 1962, in New York City. She was 12 when Little House on the Prairie began its regular run in 1974, and she had already grown up around entertainment. Her father, Thor Arngrim, was a talent manager, and her mother, Norma McMillan, was a voice actress. So Alison understood performance early, but Nellie Oleson gave her the role that would follow her for life. What made Nellie unforgettable was not simply that she was mean. Plenty of shows have mean children. Nellie was theatrical about it. She seemed to enjoy cruelty the way Harriet enjoyed gossip, turning every schoolroom insult into a performance. She could humiliate Laura with one look, weaponize her family's money, and still act as if she was the wounded party. Arngrim made that behavior funny, irritating, and strangely precise. You did not just dislike Nellie. You waited for her, because the moment she appeared, the scene tightened. And that is the secret of the role. Nellie gave Laura something to push against. She made Laura's temper sharper, her pride louder, and her victories sweeter. Without Nellie, Laura's childhood would have had less friction. With her, every school day, town event, and mercantile visit could turn into a battle. Arngrim understood the rhythm of that rivalry. She leaned into the selfishness, the vanity, the spoiled confidence, and then let the punishment land when the story finally gave Laura a win. Behind the scenes, the opposite was happening. Alison Arngrim and Melissa Gilbert were friends, even though their characters fought constantly. That contrast helped make the on-screen rivalry stronger. They could throw themselves into the mud, the shouting, and the comic cruelty because there was trust underneath it. The audience saw enemies. The set had two girls growing up inside the same strange television family. Arngrim originally auditioned for Laura and Mary before landing Nellie, which now feels almost impossible to imagine. She did not just play the part, she owned being hated. Later, instead of running from the character, she turned that public dislike into comedy, storytelling, and power. Her memoir, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch: How I Survived Nellie Oleson and Learned to Love Being Hated, was released in 2010, and the title said what fans already knew. Alison had made peace with the girl everyone loved to boo. Her life beyond Little House also carried serious purpose. After Steve Tracy, who played Nellie's husband Percival Dalton, died in 1986 from AIDS-related complications, Arngrim became active in AIDS awareness work. She has also spoken publicly as a survivor of childhood abuse and supported child protection advocacy. That makes her story deeper than the curls and the tantrums. The actress who played television's spoiled bully used her voice for people who needed protection. That lasting surprise is what keeps her section of the Prairie alive for old and new viewers. Nellie Oleson endures because Alison Arngrim made childhood cruelty iconic, comic, and unforgettable. She gave Walnut Grove its sharpest young enemy, but also gave television one of its greatest reminders that the character you love to hate may be played by someone far braver, warmer, and more generous than the role ever allowed. Number 10. Jonathan Gilbert as Willie Oleson. Jonathan Gilbert as Willie Oleson is the boy trapped between Harriet's noise and Nels's patience, the little brother who made the Oleson household feel even more alive. After Nellie turned spoiled pride into a weapon, Willie showed what it looked like to grow up inside that same house, smaller, louder, frightened, mischievous, and always one bad idea away from trouble. Jonathan J. Gilbert, pronounced John-a-Thun Gilbert, was born on April 28, 1967, in Los Angeles, California. He was 7 when Little House on the Prairie began its regular run in 1974, and the role became his first major acting job. He was also the younger brother of Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura Ingalls, which added another strange layer to the show. On screen, Laura and Willie belonged to rival families. Off-screen, the children were connected by real family. Willie Oleson could have disappeared behind Harriet and Nellie, but Jonathan made him memorable because he played him with nervous, comic energy. Willie was spoiled, but not as sharp as Nellie. He was rude, but often because he was copying what he heard at home. He teased, lied, complained, and followed bad examples, yet there was always something softer underneath. Viewers could laugh at him because he rarely seemed truly dangerous. He was a boy trying to survive his mother's control, his sister's confidence, and his own poor judgment. That is what made Willie's later growth matter. In the early seasons, he was the child who sat in the schoolroom waiting for punishment. In later years, he became older, more self-aware, and capable of standing up for himself. One of his most remembered adult moments came when Willie chose Rachel Brown and finally pushed back against Harriet's control. It was not just a romantic decision. It was the moment the boy everyone had watched squirm under his mother's voice finally became a man in front of Walnut Grove. Jonathan Gilbert appeared through all 9 seasons of the series, and he also appeared in Little House television movies, including Look Back to Yesterday and The Last Farewell. He acted with Melissa Gilbert in the 1979 television film The Miracle Worker as well. But after his childhood years in front of the camera, he made a choice many fans did not expect. He walked away. According to Melissa Gilbert's memoir and later cast updates, Jonathan left Hollywood at 18, went to business school, and built a private life far from television. He later worked as a stockbroker in New York, becoming one of the rare Little House child actors who stepped almost completely out of public entertainment. That disappearance made fans even more curious, because Willie had been present in their homes for nearly a decade, then the actor behind him seemed to vanish. For years, Jonathan kept that distance. Then, in 2024, he reunited with Melissa Gilbert and other cast members during the 50th anniversary celebration in Simi Valley. For longtime viewers, that return felt quietly emotional. Willie Oleson was no longer the restless boy in the schoolroom. He was a man who had lived most of his life outside fame, and still came back to the Prairie memory that never stopped following him. Willie Olison endures because Jonathan Gilbert made mischief human. He gave Walnut Grove a boy who could annoy you, make you laugh, and still earn a surprising kind of affection. In the Olison family, Willie was never the loudest storm, but he was the child who showed that even troublemakers can grow up in time. Number 11. Victor French as Isaiah Edwards. Victor French as Isaiah Edwards is the rough voice that made Walnut Grove feel older, sadder, and more dangerous than the Ingalls cabin alone could show. After Willie Olison gave the town its restless mischief, Mr. Edwards brought in the wounded outsider, the man with the beard, the laugh, the bottle, the loyalty, and the kind of loneliness that does not disappear just because people welcome you home. Victor Edwin French, pronounced Victor French, was born on December 4th, 1934, in Santa Barbara, California. He was 39 when Little House on the Prairie began its regular run in 1974, and by that point he had already spent years playing hard men on television, especially in westerns. Before Walnut Grove, many viewers knew him from Gunsmoke, where he often appeared as villains, roughnecks, and men shaped by violence. That history made Isaiah Edwards feel believable. French did not enter the show like a polished family friend. He looked weathered. He sounded bruised. He carried himself like a man who had slept outdoors, fought too many battles, and learned to laugh before anyone could ask what hurt him. That is why his friendship with Charles Pa Ingalls mattered. Pa was steady. Edwards was broken in places Pa could not fix, but could still love. In the earliest seasons, Mr. Edwards gave Little House one of its strongest emotional contrasts. He could be comic, singing Old Dan Tucker, joking with the children, or bringing sudden warmth into the room. Then, in another moment, French could let the sadness come through, and the same man felt haunted. The show used him to explore grief, addiction, loss, and redemption, but French kept the character from becoming a lesson. Isaiah Edwards felt like a person first, not a message. His relationship with the Ingalls children gave him another layer. He was not their father, but he was protective, teasing, and tender in a way that made him feel like chosen family. With Laura especially, he had the air of an uncle who could make a child laugh while carrying pain no child should have to understand. That mix of roughness and softness became his signature. French left the regular cast for a period and starred in Carter Country, but he later returned to Little House, and his return reminded viewers how much the town had missed his presence. He also directed episodes, showing that his contribution went beyond performance. Like Michael Landon, he understood the rhythm of emotional television, where a simple scene could break an audience if the actor trusted the silence. After Little House, French reunited with Landon on Highway to Heaven, playing Mark Gordon opposite Landon's Jonathan Smith. Once again, he became the earthly, gruff, wounded partner beside a man offering hope. Their chemistry worked because it already carried years of trust from the Prairie, and from the kind of friendship viewers believed before the dialogue explained it. Then came another loss too soon. Victor French died on June 15, 1989, after a battle with lung cancer. He was only 54. His death came 2 years before Michael Landon's, making the friendship fans loved feel even more fragile in memory. The men who once made hope look sturdy were suddenly gone far too young. Isaiah Edwards endures because Victor French made brokenness lovable. He gave Walnut Grove its rough edge, its lonely laugh, and its proof that family is not always blood. Sometimes it is the damaged man who keeps coming back, still singing, still hurting, and still trying to belong anywhere. Number 12. Kevin Hagen as Dr. Hiram Baker. Kevin Hagen as Dr. Hiram Baker is the healer who made Walnut Grove feel less alone. After Isaiah Edwards brought rough laughter and wounded loyalty into the town, Dr. Baker brought the steady hands. He was the man people sent for when birth, fever, injury, fear, or death came too close. In a place where life could change before sundown, his buggy arriving meant someone still had a chance. Kevin Hagen, pronounced KV in Hagun, was born on April 3, 1928, in Chicago, Illinois. He was 46 when Little House on the Prairie began its regular run in 1974, and he joined the series as Hiram Doc Baker, Walnut Grove's town doctor and veterinarian. That last detail mattered. On the Prairie, a doctor did not only treat people. He treated horses, cattle, neighbors, babies, old friends, and sometimes the emotional panic of an entire town. Hagen gave Dr. Baker a kind of decency that never asked for attention. He did not enter scenes like a hero. He entered like a professional who had seen too much and still cared enough to come. His face carried concern without melodrama. His voice was calm enough to make frightened families listen. And when he had bad news, he delivered it with the weight of a man who knew that medicine in Walnut Grove had limits. That made him one of the show's most trusted figures. Dr. Baker stood at the doorway between hope and grief. He was present for illnesses, births, accidents, epidemics, and impossible choices. He could not save everyone, and Little House never let viewers forget that. But Hagen made the character powerful because he never acted above the pain. He stayed near it. He absorbed it. He returned the next day anyway. One of the reasons Dr. Baker worked so well was that Hagen had spent years playing very different men before Walnut Grove. Earlier in his career, he often played villains, lawmen, soldiers, and hard television characters in westerns and dramas. That past gave his kindness texture. He did not feel soft because he lacked toughness. He felt kind because he had outgrown the need to prove it. The show also gave Dr. Baker rare personal moments. In Doctor's Lady, he faced romance and vulnerability. In To Run and Hide, he temporarily left his practice after blaming himself for a patient's death, only to learn how deeply the town depended on him. Those stories mattered because they showed the doctor was not only the person who carried everyone else. He was also a man carrying private doubts. After Little House, Hagen continued acting, appearing in shows such as General Hospital and Matlock. He also embraced the Prairie legacy through a one-man stage show called A Playful Dose of Prairie Wisdom, built around memories and reflections from the world of Doc Baker. That title says something important. Fans did not only remember him as a doctor, they remembered him as a source of gentle counsel. In 2004, Hagen was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. He died on July 9, 2005, at his home in Grants Pass, Oregon at 77. His passing closed the life of an actor who had turned a supporting role into a symbol of comfort. Dr. Hiram Baker endures because Kevin Hagen made compassion feel practical. He showed that healing is not always saving a life. Sometimes it is showing up, speaking softly, holding steady, and making a frightened town believe help has finally arrived again. Exactly, when hope seemed almost gone, right at the door. Number 13. Dabbs Greer as Rev. Robert Alden. Dabbs Greer as Rev. Robert Alden is the voice that made Walnut Grove feel watched over. After Dr. Hiram Baker cared for the body, Rev. Alden cared for the spirit, standing in the church, at gravesides, at weddings, and beside families when the Prairie had taken more than anyone knew how to carry. He was not loud faith. He was steady faith, the kind that sits with people after the sermon is over. Robert William Dabbs Greer, pronounced D. Dag Greer, was born on April 2, 1917, in Fairview, Missouri. He was 57 when Little House on the Prairie began its regular run in 1974, and by then he had already become one of television's most familiar character actors. His face had been in westerns, dramas, comedies, and family shows for decades, sometimes so naturally that viewers did not always know his name, but they trusted him anyway. That quality made him perfect for Rev. Robert Alden, pronounced Albiert Alden. The minister of Walnut Grove could have been stiff, scolding, or distant. Greer made him warm. He gave Alden a gentle patience that fit the town's hardest moments. When children were afraid, when marriages were tested, when loss entered the church, he did not perform holiness like a costume. He made it look like service. Rev. Alden mattered, because Little House was never only about surviving land and weather. It was about conscience. It was about forgiveness, pride, shame, charity, judgment, and the painful work of trying again. Greer often stood at the center of those questions. In his hands, the church was not just a building. It was where Walnut Grove argued with itself, and then tried to become better. His scenes with the Ingalls family carried quiet weight. Charles respected him. Caroline trusted him. Laura listened, even when she was still wrestling with her own stubborn heart. Alden could be kind, but he was not empty. He could correct people without cruelty. He could ask for compassion without sounding weak. That balance helped keep the show from turning its faith into decoration. It felt lived in, tested, and human. Before Little House, Greer had already built a remarkable career. He appeared as Mr. Jonas on Gunsmoke, worked on series such as The Adventures of Superman and The Twilight Zone, and even performed famous television weddings, including Mike and Carol Brady on The Brady Bunch. That history followed him into Walnut Grove. He seemed like the kind of actor television had always needed, the man who could step into a small role and make it feel permanent. After Little House, Greer kept working, including a later minister role on Picket Fences, and a memorable final film appearance as the elderly Paul Edgecombe in The Green Mile. By then, he had appeared in nearly 100 films and about 600 television episodes, a career built not on glamour, but on dependability, timing, kindness, and that rare gift of making ordinary men feel quietly unforgettable. Dabbs Greer died on April 28, 2007, in Pasadena, California, at 90 years old, after battling kidney and heart disease. His passing felt like losing one of television's gentle elders, the kind of presence people did not realize had been guiding them for years. Rev. Robert Alden endures because Dabbs Greer made faith feel humble. He gave Walnut Grove a conscience without making it cold. And every time the church doors open again, his quiet voice still feels ready to welcome the broken, the ashamed, and the hopeful back inside, when the world outside had gone silent. Number 14. Dean Butler as Almanzo Wilder. Dean Butler as Almanzo Wilder is the moment Little House on the Prairie stopped being only Laura's childhood story and became the story of the woman she was becoming. After Rev. Robert Alden gave Walnut Grove its spiritual center, Almanzo brought Laura face to face with a different kind of future. Not a lesson from Pa, not a scolding from Ma, but love, risk, pride, and the frightening step beyond home. Dean Butler, pronounced Dean but Lear, was born on May 20th, 1956, in Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. He was 23 when he joined Little House in Season 6 in 1979 as Almanzo James Wilder, the farmer who would eventually become Laura Ingalls Wilder's husband. Melissa Gilbert was 15 when he arrived, a fact both actors had discussed with care in later years, because the age difference looks very different to modern viewers. On screen, Almanzo had to do a difficult job. He had to enter a show built around Laura's girlhood and convince the audience that the little girl they had watched for years was growing into someone ready for romance, marriage, and adult struggle. Butler played him with confidence, but not arrogance. Almanzo could be proud, stubborn, protective, and sometimes too sure of himself, yet there was warmth underneath the temper. He was not Pa's replacement. He was the first man Laura chose for herself. That choice changed the emotional direction of the series. Laura's nickname for him, Manly, became one of the sweetest sounds in the later seasons, partly because it belonged to a love story viewers saw forming step by step. First came awkwardness, then admiration, then conflict, then the moment Laura could no longer remain half-pint forever. Almanzo forced the show to let her grow, and Butler carried that shift without making it feel false. The casting also brought tension that fans still talk about. In interviews around the 50th anniversary and his memoir Prairie Man, Butler acknowledged that the romantic storyline between a 23-year-old actor and a 15-year-old co-star would not likely be handled the same way today. That honesty matters. It allows viewers to keep the affection for the story while also understanding the discomfort through older eyes. Butler's life after Little House did not freeze on the prairie. He continued acting, appearing in the new Gidget, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and other television work, then moved strongly behind the camera as a producer of entertainment, sports, and documentary programming. He also stayed closely connected to the Little House legacy, creating bonus features for the DVD collections and narrating and directing documentary work about Laura Ingalls Wilder and the world behind the books. In 2024, Butler published Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond, a memoir looking back at fame, faith, fan devotion, and what it meant to be remembered as Almanzo for generations. That title alone says something. He did not run from the role. He studied it, preserved it, and helped explain why the prairie still matters. In 2026, Dean Butler turned 70, and fans still greet him not only as an actor, but as the man who carried Laura into adulthood without breaking the emotional thread of the series. Almanzo Wilder endures because Dean Butler made growing up feel tender and uneasy. He gave Laura a future, gave viewers a romance to remember, and reminded everyone that leaving childhood behind is one of the hardest journeys any beloved story can take. Again, long after home changed. Number 15. Matthew Labyorteaux as Albert Ingalls. Matthew Labyorteaux as Albert Ingalls is the son Little House on the Prairie invented, but somehow made fans feel as if he had always belonged there. After Almanzo carried Laura toward adulthood, Albert pulled the series back into another kind of childhood, one marked by abandonment, hunger, trouble, gratitude, and the aching need to be chosen. Matthew Charles Labyorteaux, pronounced Matthew Labyorteaux, was born on December 8, 1966, in Los Angeles, California. He first appeared on Little House in 1976 as young Charles Ingalls in flashbacks, then joined the regular story in 1978 as Albert Quinn Ingalls, the orphan Charles and Caroline eventually took into their family. He was 11 when Albert entered the series, and that age gave the role a rawness older actors could not fake. Albert was not part of Laura Ingalls Wilder's original books. He was created for the television series, which made the character a risk. Viewers already loved the Ingalls family. Bringing in a new child could have felt forced, but Labyorteaux made Albert feel wounded enough to need them, and charming enough for the audience to accept him. He came in as a boy who knew how to survive on the streets, steal when necessary, talk fast, hide pain, and test whether love was real. That is why Albert changed the later seasons. He gave Charles a new son to protect after years of raising daughters. He gave Laura a brother with sharp edges. He gave the show another young actor who could carry serious emotion without breaking the old family rhythm. Matthew did not play Albert as a perfect rescued child. He played him as grateful, insecure, clever, sometimes dishonest, and deeply afraid that belonging could be taken back. His scenes with Charles often turned rescue into trust, then trust into quiet belonging slowly. Some of Albert's storylines became among the darkest in the series. In Home Again, he struggled with morphine addiction, a storyline that shocked many viewers because it placed drug dependency inside a family show known for moral comfort. In the television movie Look Back to Yesterday, Albert was shown as gravely ill while still dreaming of becoming a doctor. The show left parts of his fate emotionally complicated, and fans still debate exactly how to understand his ending. That confusion only made Albert feel more haunting. After Little House, Labyorteaux continued working. He appeared in the Red Hand Gang and Whiz Kids, guest starred on shows including The Love Boat and Night Court, and later moved strongly into voice acting. He became known to a new generation through animation and games, including the English voice of Jaden Yuki in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. That second career showed how far he could move beyond Walnut Grove while still carrying the affection of Prairie fans. His older brother, Patrick Labyorteaux, also appeared on Little House as Andrew Andy Garvey, which made the series part of a larger family chapter. Matthew later married Leslie Labyorteaux in 2020, and People has reported that he became stepfather to her 2 children. Unlike some former child stars, he has lived much of his adult life quietly, returning mainly through interviews, conventions, and the lasting devotion of viewers who never forgot Albert. Albert Ingalls endures because Matthew Labyorteaux made adoption feel emotional, messy, and real. He gave the Ingalls family a son born from television imagination, but accepted through feeling. And every time he appears in Walnut Grove, the story reminds us that family is sometimes the place where a lost child finally stops running. Little House on the Prairie ends, but Walnut Grove never really closes. The cabin, the church, the mercantile, the schoolroom, and that dusty road still carry the faces viewers trusted for years. Some cast members stayed with us, some stepped away, some left too soon. But together they turned a simple family drama into a memory that still feels personal. Every time Pa smiles, Ma steadies the room, Laura runs, Mary suffers, Carrie watches, and the town gathers again, the Prairie feels alive. If this journey brought back your favorite memories, stay with us for more classic television stories soon.